watching a Fact TV presentation of the town of Swanzey.
Make a motion that we approve the regular meeting minutes of August 30th.
Second.
Motion's been made and seconded to approve the regular meeting minutes of August 30th. Those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Make the motion we approve the non-public meeting minutes 1 and 2, August 30th.
Second.
Motion's been made and seconded to approve the non-public meeting minutes of number 1, number 2 of August 30th. Are there any additions, deletions? Hearing none, those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Make the motion we approve the consent agenda.
Second.
Motion's been made and seconded to approve the consent agenda. Any additions, deletions?
I had added items K and L, updated agenda that I sent out yesterday. So it was another event for the Swansea Recreation Department's Halloween Block Party, and then the low income housing tax credit program for 2023 for the properties that are eligible.
Okay, any questions?
Yeah, I don't understand what you said. Are you adding something to these?
I did to what I sent out yesterday.
Yeah.
Is it on here? Okay, got it. Never mind, thank you.
Okay, no further additions, deletions, whatever. Those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Public input.
Yeah, so Mark Square from Wilson Pond, Ward from Wilson Pond. So we thought maybe today we would kind of go over some things that we see around Wilson Pond, some proposal ideas, some concerns, or give you some updates on all of it. Looking at your agenda, I'm willing to defer that to maybe the next meeting. I listen to all these meetings online. There's usually nobody here at all. We picked a week where there's a lot of people here. So what I'd like to do today is just recite some of the topics that I'd like to go over and leave it at that, unless you have any questions from that. And so we want to go over the water quality results with you, inform of how our pond is doing. We have some aquatic and shoreline vegetation issues or concerns that we'd like to bring to your attention. Like
Okay, great. Thank you.
we started the New Hampshire Lake Smart program. So we, quite a few people are started that, and I actually had a property walkthrough just last week, and we're looking to really establish that, kind of as a prerequisite and something that'll help us with a potential water management program grant we think we need, and that's based on the amount of vegetation that's growing. All those things are all kind of related. I want to talk about seasonal road salt and treatment, and see if there's any alternatives or reduction around the roads around Wilson Pond. Once again, it's all related to water quality. The water level observation, what's working, what's not working. Fared the storm very well, and
What was that?
we fared the storms very well, and we just want to go over that. And I spoke with Mike this past week, but we want to just bring to the board's attention our concerns with the Upper Wilson Pond reconstruction, Upper Wilson Pond dam reconstruction. Any off-schedule water testing, we want to just talk about that. That was something that came up briefly during the catastrophic rain event. We were asked a question or two, which probably didn't fall to us, but we just wanted to bring that up. We both go on shoreline erosion, so there's definitely a lot of erosion along that shoreline, and we've got a proposal or an idea of what could be done to remediate that so we don't get those. There's some cleanup efforts that we do weekly. We do seasonally, and also now that does as well. We just want you to be aware of all those. And then there's another one here, the Monadnock Chopper disturbance. I want to bring that to your attention. It's kind of noisy out there, and sometimes, and we don't think it should be. that way, based on our understanding of what transpired several years ago. So we can talk about that. And then I want to offer everybody sitting at those tables the boat ride on Wilson Pond. Come out and see it yourself. I would welcome an opportunity if you guys get a window or get some time, you want to come out, take a tour for an hour, you want to come out for a sunset, let me know. I'd love to have you guys out there so you can kind of see what we see firsthand and just kind of have a nice evening or a nice afternoon.
What is the Lake Smart program?
So the New Hampshire Lake Smart program, it's really an education program, okay? I'm freezing up here with something. I know exactly.
You're not named Mitch, I don't think.
What's
I don't think your name is Mitch.
You fill out a questionnaire, and then they send you some examples of things you could do better, and if you invite them, they will come and look at your property, and they will give you suggestions about how you could better manage your property to avoid contaminants going into the water. And it's a very good educational program, free. And if we get everyone, the majority of people around the pond to do it, we not only help improve the quality of life on the pond, but we set ourselves up for potentially asking for a watershed management study, kind of like what Swanzey Lake is.
Great.
So it starts with individual homeowners getting involved, and we've been encouraging people to do that, and we've got a dozen people or so.
Yeah, those people signed up, have done the survey. Survey takes about 15 minutes. You get immediate results from that survey, giving you some ideas and things to look for in your property. As you address those and you get to a point where you feel comfortable having, one of the people come out and walk your property, you do that, and they'll give you a healthy living healthy lake living report to, what you guys agreed on doing. In my case, I agreed on about 200 feet of cut lawn along the water's edge, grow naturally, right? And we have to be cut lawn right up to the water's edge, right? Once you kind of meet those requirements and show you're doing it, you get a nice sign you put up on your, on your property, and that's what we want to see. Right? So, but it's purely an educational process. It's totally voluntary.
Great.
Good.
All right. So,
You put them on the agenda?
What's that?
We'll be putting them on the agenda.
Yes.
there's a couple here, I don't know, like I should really just want to let you guys pass that around, making sure better.
Thank you, gentlemen.
Thanks very much.
Yeah, thank you.
Just so I know.
Okay, Bill. Oh,
So I handed out, so the cover sheet is the pages that you saw before, and the second page is the second page of what you saw before, and Chief and I put together some, data both specific to the ambulance and then just general response rates. We have new software that started using last August called ESO, which I know he has some programmatic issues with, but in terms of running reports, it does have a lot of nice features. Unfortunately, they all come out untitled, so I kind of wrote titles at the top. For last year, we used, because we started in August, we didn't have a lot of data in ESO, so we used what Deluzio had provided through Q3, which was the last report we got from them. So just to provide some comparison for percentage of calls basically being responded to by Swanzey. So I thought that kind of came up. It was a little separate, I think, from what we were suggesting about disposing of the ambulance, but I want to provide some additional backup information. So do you want to speak to your suggestion of disposing of the ambulance?
Yeah, so Michael had asked me to write a summary on basically the use and current use of the ambulance, the activity, and it's becoming less and less. We had a sign with county EMS, as our primary transport service. We haven't done a transport since they have taken over. And we're still responding out there to calls, like Mike just said, we're still in 75% of responding out to EMS calls, but not as a transport capability. Now, I mean, you know, when the ambulance was first brought on board, you know, it was, nobody knew really what was gonna happen. Yeah, you know, at the time, the pandemic was going on and things, we weren't sure what the workload was gonna be. So we had basically brought that in as an insurance policy, for the overflow and capabilities of transport. Now, our capabilities have changed since that. We're not paramedic any longer, paramedic service. Again, we're paying a service contracted through the county to do our primary transports, in which is working out. So, you know, just to come down to make a decision on whether we're going to keep this 11-year-old vehicle, 176,000 miles on it, and it remains or requires frequent maintenance and inspections. And that's what I'm presenting to the board. So, I mean, when we break it down, it seems like to reduce our fleet, that might be one of the sacrifices we need to do. So similar to when we replace engine 2, hopefully in the near future, that's going to replace the RSQ1 and engine 2. So we're going to be reducing our fleet by one apparatus as well. So, you know, each apparatus, right now, September, this time of year, each rig goes in for service, annual service and inspection. That's $1,500 per apparatus. So, again, you know, from a cost savings standpoint, you know, just to make a decision on what we're going to do with it. I mean, as the board always stated too, they really, you know, always put out that, you know, we'll see how things are going, we'll see how things are going. So, I mean, you know, I don't think it's practical to look for a replacement vehicle in a few years and to continue the transport, down the transport road. So,
I guess my question was, if we do sell it and it's just sold as a chassis, are we giving away the expensive parts, which is the stretcher, stair chair, IV pump, all those things?
Well, I mean, that's a possibility, but
So I'd like to
separate.
sell them separate so we get that money too, you know?
Absolutely, yeah. Yeah, so that, like the stair chair and stretcher, were almost as equal as the apparatus itself, so, yeah.
Thank you.
Do you think it might be more value to kind of break the pieces, some of those more expensive pieces off and sell them separate?
It's a possibility unless you find the right buyer who wants the whole package. There are outfits out there that will take that equipment, that buy used equipment, semi-used equipment. So we could obviously pursue that.
The reason I questioned it was that it's something that isn't costing us anything. We still haven't come to a long-term solution for ambulance service in the area. So I'm just curious of what the cost is to hold on to it. It's $1,500 a year, but it seems like a minimal cost if there's a need as we work through the process of understanding what the future is going to be for ambulance service. And I hadn't thought of it the way Sly did. It was just from the perspective that there's really no cost, or there may not be. Maybe there is.
Well, I mean, there's, you never know. Something can go wrong. So maybe the transmission or motor or something catastrophic goes, it's going to be a significant cost to keep it. It could run, it sits most of the time at this point in time. So it's not doing many runs or any runs at all. It's not doing transport, so. I mean, you know, you can certainly keep retaining to the fleet and revisit it down, you know, down the road, but, that was the information that compiled to, you know, kind of, make a decision on it now, so.
Sure. I appreciate it.
How many miles were on that when you got it?
I would say, I think about 150 or so. We probably put about 20 on it.
What's your pleasure?
That's my line. What's your pleasure?
How do you craft the motion? How do you want? I mean, I'd prefer that we kept it, but if we sell it, how do you want it?
Yeah, leave it up to Michael and Bill to, you know, work on the best way to recoup some of that money for the stretcher and stair chair, ID pump and stuff.
What do you think the value is on the market?
I was hoping you wouldn't ask me that question. I don't know. We have to compare it to similar vehicles out there. I don't have a solid figure for that. I know with the stretcher and the stair chair, probably around 25,000 together. You know, it's like it's still in, you know, really good shape. I mean, almost new shape. So that equipment's significant. So
Did we pay for those or was it grant?
that was from the
funding?
grant money. Yeah.
So the entire package was grant funded?
Right. Well,
Or whatever, reimbursement or something?
It was like 55,000.
Yeah.
That was a reimbursement?
Yeah, it was the CARES Act, correct, so yeah. reimbursement. And we can always, to your point of what's the value, if we post it, and we always say that our stuff is continuing being voted on, if we get an offer that we just, yeah, it's really not worth it, to your point, it's hanging on to it another year, you can always make that decision. Maybe that's a reason to post the vehicle before selling the other stuff.
Does it go on municipal bid?
Yes, yes.
So you want that motion? How would you like it crafted? Yeah, well,
Dispose of the ambulance and related medical equipment, paramedic medical equipment.
and leave it to yours and Bill's discretion as to whether we receive, or whether we accept an offer.
Well, we'll bring it back to those.
Okay. Right, Beverly, I made that motion.
Medical equipment and the ambulance,
And
or
the
just
ambulance.
medical equipment?
No, they.
Both. Got it,
Motion been made
Seconded.
and seconded.
yes.
Any further discussion? Hearing none, those in favor?
All right.
Aye.
Thanks, Bill.
Thank you.
Okay. You're on.
Hello. You folks know Barbara as well?
Yep. There it is.
Somebody's name. Just looking at the show.
And I think we also have on Zoom Andrew Keller from Rancho Solar Guardians, so he might want to participate a little bit as well. You're gonna make us try to reset that up now later?
It was set up, wasn't it?
Yeah.
It was perfectly set up. Oh, I'm sorry.
Well, look what you did to the projector.
Well, that's gonna be easy, just match to the screen, but
I was sitting with it in their lap.
so helpful.
Hello, everyone.
Hello.
So we've deliberated on this for some time about this New Hampshire Solar Guard. And after our last meeting, which was this week, and consulting with John Congos and Bob Hayden, we recommend that we do not go ahead with the agreement with Solar Guard. And I could give you the reasons if you'd like to hear them, why we think that it may not be such a great deal for the town.
I think those who are here might be interested in that. We read the memo.
Maybe start at a very high level of what we're even talking about too, because
So Julius will correct me if I'm wrong, but we were looking at purchasing 50% of the power from Solar Garden for 25-year term with an escalator of between 1.5 and 2% a year, starting at around 16 cents a kilowatt hour. So 15
15,
cents.
16, depending on the escalator,
Yeah.
or the contract.
And, you know, talking with the folks at Solar Garden, they were concerned that if they didn't have a big fire, because they couldn't go ahead with the project. And it's understandable, they took a couple of materials hits. Where it's the project basically was about $1 million more than they estimated to hook up to the grid because of Eversource's costs, materials costs. And, you know, we all felt one of the things about the Energy Commission is we want to produce as much power as we can locally. And we all felt that this was one step towards that. But we're concerned over the price and the term. We believe that 25 years is too long. We think we would recommend maybe a 10-year commitment, which we'd recommend maybe the select board would look at. We also believe the escalator is too high. The 1.5 to 2% is a little too high. The Route 10 site is excellent. It's not going anywhere. You can't do anything over there except turn it into another gravel pit. We also believe that solar power is something that might come to that site in the next 2 or 3 years, even if Solar Garden decides not to pursue it. And one of the big things for us, one of the big concerns was the town would be purchasing the power, not the community power plant itself. So if something happened to the community power plant, if we got a better deal, or in 3 years if we decided to do away with it, we'd actually have to go to the town during town meeting and ask them for the money to pay for our 50% share of the electricity, rather than it being part of the utility bill. The 16 cents a kilowatt hour is not horrible if you can combine it into our community power plant. It would raise the rates a little bit for everybody, but it's about 1/3 of a cent, which isn't horrible. But if you want to explain that to taxpayers, the utility users, that they would see an increase. Also, we don't know what's going to happen in the utility market. There's no telling. More than likely, prices will go up in 25 years. That's just a given. But we don't know what's going to happen in 3 years, or 30 months when we need to negotiate a new community power plant. Hopefully, we can get more renewables at less of a price, because renewables supposedly are coming down in price as fossil fuels go offline. So we would think that it's probably behooves the town to just wait a little longer before purchasing such a large chunk of electricity. Let's see through this community power plant at this point, find out what they can negotiate for us in 25, 30 months, whenever we're going to negotiate again, and then we can go back and look at how we can encourage solar power here in Swanzey. I don't know if Barbara had anything she wanted to have.
No, I think the big thing though is the 25 years. You know, trying to make that commitment and our responsibility to continue to pay that. And we don't know if something should really happen drastically with the utilities, such that maybe everybody pulls out of Swansea Community Power, and then there's no one left to pay for that commitment, for that purchase agreement, except for the taxpayers. And so that's what we just thought. 25 years is really, really difficult to comprehend in terms of the risk for the town.
And considering how successful the community power plant's been, I'm not sure if Julius shared the numbers with you, but we're really impressed. We're looking at like 93% participation, which is just fantastic. I think it just makes sense to wait a couple of years. The renewable technology is changes almost daily. We don't know what could happen. And do we want to lock ourselves in for 25 years? I don't think it's wise. I mean, we talked about it for quite a while. We do want solar power. We do want distributed energy in Swansea. We want our power production right here, but we don't think it's wise right now this time.
I mean, the immediate impact, it seems like a good deal, today, but 25 years or 20 years, 15 years from now? Is it still gonna be a big deal? You don't know.
And how do you predict, talking with Bob Hayden and John Congress, how do you predict what electricity rates are gonna be 5, 10, 50? You can't. You can't predict. They could go up, they could go down. So it's a crapshoot either way. We could go with this plan and it would be 100% benefit to the town. We don't know. We think the downside of that 25-year commitment is too much. Julius, did you want to add anything?
No, I think just one of the biggest ones, and just think, really like to emphasize that we reached out to multiple professionals on this topic and really find this as we could, using information from them, also using information from the developer as well to make this decision. That's really, those are tough. We've gone back and forth multiple times. Yes, we've gotten out, and just this is where we got to find everything else.
Andrew, with Solar Gardens, did you have anything you wanted to add or clarify or anything?
I would, yeah, that was a very good presentation. Did everybody hear me okay?
Yes.
Who's that?
Andrew Keller with New Hampshire Solar Garden.
Everybody hear me okay?
Yes.
Okay, so thank you, Mr. Chair and members of the board. Again, Andrew Keller. I'm from New Hampshire Solar Garden. I'm the developer on the project. Excuse me, I think that summary was actually well put together, and I can address some of the concerns that the committee had or has. But I just want to commend the town for the support on this project to date, because when we came to look at doing this project with the current landowner, who's been the landowner for some time, I wanted to engage with the town early on. We always want to be able to bring the maximum amount of value from these projects to the communities that are hosting the projects. If that's in the form of, a net metering credit program for the town, the schools, the local businesses, a pilot tax agreement, which the board entered into with the project, which we appreciate. So we're trying to create as much value before we look elsewhere. And that's always been our intention, to work with the town, be proactive. And when we found out that the town was going to be working towards, community power program, a CCA program, it was an obvious fit, because this project and other projects in New Hampshire that we're developing right now, the intention of them are always to support these CCA programs across the state. We understand that the intent, not specifically written in the rules, but the intent of the law was to give these communities the opportunity to control their power, but also have a chance to get their power locally and have control over that. So one detail I want to point out that I think is important, and my ask to the board tonight would be to continue this conversation and collect a little more information, because the way that we price the power, it includes both the energy and the renewable energy credits, which I do understand that the CCA went out and was able to acquire some of those environmental benefits out in the open market at a much lower price than what the New England wide renewable energy credits, or they're called RECs, if you've heard that term. The renewable energy credits valued are valued out. So there's two options that I wanted to present to the board tonight. One would be, there's always the option to remove the RECs out of the price, and that would lower the price down to 12 cents or 13 cents, the two examples that are in your packet. So we're very much market consistent with where you are today. I think the point that the committee members made is very valid. None of us here in this room or on Zoom could even guesstimate where the energy rates are going to go, what the escalation rates are going to be. Some of the feedback we received from some of the discussion we're having for some of our other projects is, after what we've been through with the volatility of the energy markets, having a known factor, like a known rate and a known escalation, is attractive, because you would have all kinds of savings in years 1 through 5 and have a year like we had last year, and all that savings would be gone in one fall swoop. So I would challenge that statement that I know is, the escalation of the rates are built out so the project can financially move forward. If not for Eversource and their changes in their equipment costs, which, as you heard, was double what we planned on. We planned on about $1 million upgrade cost on this project from when we did the work early on. But after all these supply chain issues, Eversource came back to us and said, sorry guys, it's actually $2 million. And that is, obviously, as you can imagine, it's a major material change to the project cost that could be roughly a $6 or $7 million project cost. So it really impacts the numbers substantially. If it weren't for that change, we would be here with a different number and a different escalation rate, just to be fair. So there's one option is to remove the grass, and then we would be pretty much price consistent for where the market is today. And then you have that luxury of knowing that the escalation is minimal each year versus the wide swings. The point that one of the members brought up, which again is a valid concern about what happens if there is attrition in your CC program, and how that would fall on the town's responsibility, because we would be contracting with the town. Because the town, is the accredited entity that we CCAs are kind of supported by. I'm not sure if I know the answer. Maybe one of the committee members could chime in here. Is the town itself, like town buildings and the schools, part of the CCA, or are they not part of the CCA program? Because depending on the answer, I just want to address that as a potential idea of how to come up with an option here.
No, not done.
Yeah, they're not currently included.
They're not part of it. Okay. Is that because they're under an existing supply contract with another retailer, or are they,
Yes.
are they anticipating as part of CCA in the future when that contract ends?
Potentially.
We can't speak for the school district because the school district negotiates their own power package.
Okay. But the town itself would come into the CCA after their contract ends, potentially?
Potentially.
Okay. So just as a point, again, we were listening to the committee and bottom standard as far as feedback on what amount of this power would be allocated, and what's the ratio, and how do you kind of hedge the future of what rates will be. And we were under the impression that the electric load of the CCA was north of 20 million kilowatt hours. We were trying to solve for about 10%, 10 to 15% of that number. That number isn't set in stone. I mean, we have the ability to push some of this power not only to the town, CCA, but other entities that we're talking to. So if the kind of the bite of the apple feels too big, we can adjust, like I said, we can pull the records out, just do energy. We can reduce the amount so that when you're kind of starting to hedge yourself forward into the future and taking some small kind of decisions that will help it. And it might even be worth it to back it into what the town electric usage is. So it's not really unlike if we were to do a project just for the town, the fire department group, or one of the town buildings or town properties. You would almost every single EPA in the state of New Hampshire between 20 and 25 years if you do an on-site solar project. So maybe the perspective of this is that we figure out how much that electricity is, and we allocate that much into the CCA, so it feels more like a direct benefit to the town that we're connecting with, not sharing or not cost shifting any of those liabilities onto the CCA members, which I think I heard was a concern. So that's just an idea I want to put out there. And then lastly, I just wanted to make a point. And this is just the reality, folks. I just want to share with you. I've been doing this type of development for over 13 years in New Hampshire. Most of my work has been New Hampshire based. What I've learned is a lot of the states around us have had other more aggressive incentives for solar, and those markets have filled up quickly. And New Hampshire is now one of the last states that has a modest incentive program for solar. And we've seen an incredible uptake in developers coming from the state to develop projects in our area. And the issue is not the policy, the issue is the infrastructure. Our lines, the lines moving down the street that goes to this project is limited. And our project is going to spend the money to upgrade the lines so our project can connect. But what we're seeing is that there's not a lot of other room. There's very, very unlikely to be room on that substation in town that can support more renewable energy projects. And we're seeing this widespread across the whole country, where the infrastructure issues and those constraints that are slowing down the deployment of solar into these type of programs. So waiting can be a good friend. My experience over the last 13 years in solar is the longer you wait, things usually get more expensive. And we saw that firsthand with this project. So I just want to bring that to the board's attention and just wrap up my comments by saying, we haven't spoken to the CCA, the retail supply contract, retail supplier that you get those contracted with, to understand how we can physically work with them to make sure that the blending of the power is not a cost liability, more of a cost benefit. And I would love to have that conversation with the board recommendation to do that, so we can really come back with real numbers and real percentage and how it would be allocated to potentially the town's load for the future. So we kind of mitigate some of that liability to the CCA itself. So I'm happy to answer any questions, but again, I appreciate the board's time and consideration on taking a little bit more time to make a final decision of this. And I very much respect what the committee's done so far as providing this information, because for the most of it, I can't say it's incorrect, actually, a lot of it's very correct. I just wanted to add a few more details to the mix.
Thank you. I mean, being able to lower the price is great, and even at 16 cents across the board, it's not a big bite, or a big addition to our community power plan, so one way or another, it's not a horrible thing. Again, I think the sticking point for us was the 25-year commitment. We believe that a 10-year commitment is more practical for the town. We also know that Bob Hayden wants to talk to them about integrating, if we go ahead, integrating the solar garden production into our community power plant. He may even want the power himself if we say no to solar garden. That's something that those guys have to work on. And the whole thing about New Hampshire being an outlier in New England is so true. Yes, it's partly infrastructure, but it is policy too. And if the administration changes and during the next election, depending on who comes in, all those incentives might change and everything might just blow open for solar power. If it stays the same, we don't know. I mean, we're pushing hard to encourage renewables in New Hampshire, and we're going to continue to push hard. It might not be as hard if the administration changes in the next election. So these are things we can't predict. What we can do is say we really like local solar power. We want a contract for 10 years. We think that's a great deal. We'll roll it into our community power plant. But we still don't, the 25-year thing is the real hiccup for us.
Yeah, I think the only other question is, Andrew, so you made it very clear that you had a timeline as for these, last energy commission meeting, when before the end of this month. Are we still tied by that timeline, or is that not the case anymore, or can you speak to that?
Do you mind just going up to the button? Speak a little bit closer, it's a little bit low, sorry.
Yeah, no, my bad. So, at the last Energy Commission meeting, you expressed that there was a timeline that we had to receive some level of approval. And so either, you said at the end of this month, that's kind of your goal. If we're gonna go back to the table and look at this proposal again with Bob and in room and I guess really delve into this, is the end of this month still work for you guys, or is that not the case anymore?
Yeah, no, thank you for clarifying. Actually, you're that here. So, just for the board's education, when we spoke to the committee last time, we completed our member source engineering work. And once we finish that work, every source gives us 30 days-ish, plus or minus, to make a 25% deposit payment to keep the project active in their system. So if we don't pay $500,000 on this project in a very short window, which those 15 seconds change from that, the project will fall out of the queue and we'll have to start all over again, which has taken us almost 2 years to get to this point with every source. So we have been navigating that very carefully. Every source is very much understaffed right now. We've lost some of their main engineers. I just learned recently. So they are very, very short staffed. And they've been struggling to get things back to us in a timely manner. So we spoke with them about that and asked for them to push out the date on the deposit. Having had physically time ourselves to receive the executed contracts, they put the plan in place and make that very large deposit. And, we're working in parallel to this conversation with the town on other off-taker, people that would buy the power for this project, not just the town. Because the money behind my projects, the investor funds that I have in place in the projects are going to want to know that there's somebody who bought the power where they, write a check for $500,000. So to answer your question directly, we have a little bit more time. I asked our source to give us until the beginning of November to make that payment. Then give us the next 6 weeks to find a solution for who will buy the power for this project, be it the town in some portion, some amount, or if the town is explicitly not interested. Out of respect for what I've offered the town from day one, I would give them the first right of refusal on this opportunity before I went elsewhere, before I sign any further contracts. So we can take the time to see if there's a place of land, or if the board still is very much opposed to this, and then I will, take it off the table and we'll, focus elsewhere. Still with the intention of getting the project done and showing some value to the town, like the pilot, and we don't want to disband it and speak of this, we just want to move forward as far as we can.
Can I ask Andrew a question? Andrew, this is Bob from the Energy Commission. Would you be consider negotiating that term of the contract? Would that be part of the discussion?
I wish I could say yes on that one. These projects, we're not like a hydro facility. Hydro facilities are already built. This is a brand new facility, and unless you're a utility scale project, officially a 1.1 project, it's really hard to get the project built. So I unfortunately have to say no to that. I wish I could say yes.
And I do have another point that one of our advisors said that projects like this usually the return on investment is usually 7 to 10 years. And they said that means for 15 years, the investors would be making money off of the town of Swanzey. Now, does that make sense?
Not really. Usually it's probably close to at these interconnection costs on this project, it's probably about 10 years to get your money back, and then thereafter you're starting to make money. So it's not unlike going to a bank to get a loan for a home or a car. We have a return rate that we're striving to meet, which is usually around 20% return. This isn't like if you looked at even 20% return on your money. And if you don't meet that number, then you don't get the loan just like you would get the mortgage on a house, for example. So we're trying to balance the act with the term, the rate, the escalation, because right now, at this point, everything else is a known factor. We know how much the interconnection is, which is the big one, we know what the cost of build is going to be, we know what the cost of buying land is. So all this, the pilot payment is in the town. So we have all those very known numbers. We spent probably about $180,000 or $90,000 paid to get this project permitted to this point. So now we're down to the last couple of points that we, have to figure out how to make.
Thank you.
I've got one last one, if you don't mind. So Andrew, the last really concern that the Energy Commission had was with the percentage. We're talking, 1.5 or 2, depending on which proposal we're talking about. Ultimately, are those rates locked? Are you willing to go down? Do we do something like a 1% or a 0.5? I know some agreements are discussed at either linear rates or even actually regressing rates, so it can actually decrease over time, depending on the estimated change in energy. So that's kind of my question. What's your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I've heard about we're doing a lot of these different projects out in California. There's a lot of CCA market in California, is a very mature market, as you may know. And their requirements on the energy have to be fixed for the between years. On these smaller scale, big projects in the desert that are hundreds of acres, thousands of acres, those are a different animal altogether, not even what the CCA are typically looking for fixed rate. That means there's no escalation, there's no risk. You're just taking the chance that at the end you look lower, a little bit like a 1 year on the background, you're not fighting yourself. I haven't looked specifically at what that number would look like if you were just the kind of the fixed rate number. I can go back and check that. That's what I think they're going to request. Or if there's a way to adjust that escalation, we can chart it out and see what it looks like, what the rate will be in the future, and see if that's palatable to the committee or to the board.
We might have an October meeting after all.
We might.
Yeah, if we could get Bob and Andrew in the same room, if John's available, it'd be great.
I think it's worth mentioning that you had calculated that escalator out to 25 years and the price ended up being 22 cents.
Yes.
So.
I think 22 cents could be a deal 25 years from now. We don't know.
If I understood Andrew correctly and from his paragraph here, whether we make the decision to move forward for Swanzey or not, the project's going to move forward because there's other entities that are interested in buying it. So that kind of takes the pressure off us for this purpose. I'm more interested in understanding the ownership concept. I didn't realize that the town of Swansea was going to be the buyer. So how does that structure, I'm not personally comfortable with being in the utility business with something that we're not skilled at. And so I'd be curious to know how that structure would be formed, and then what other communities have you had the opportunity to talk to be able to understand that process?
We hadn't really talked to anybody about that. The community power program would probably find a way to integrate it so that all the users that are signed on board would get that power. The question is, are we going to stick with Standard Energy, or are we going to go with the new CC Community Power Coalition in New Hampshire, which is really doing great? They've got their legs under them. We might want to transfer over to them. But our impression is that whatever the town would purchase from Solar Garden would be rolled into the community power plant. The town is still going to be the owner of that electricity. The resident utility users will be buying that electricity. But again, if for some crazy, outrageous reason the community power program collapsed and everybody pulled out of it, the town itself is responsible for that 50% or whatever we bought, not the utility users. So you'd have to come with a warrant item and say, hey, we need $100,000 to pay for this contract this year. So, I'm just shooting the number off my head, but the point is that the town is going to be the purchaser. And my understanding, one way or another, we could roll it into our community power plan. Worst case scenario, that plan folds up, the town is responsible for those expenses, not the utility users. And that causes a little bit of discomfort.
So did you all discuss that concept at all? And what's your level of comfort with that?
That's one of the reasons why we're opting not to pursue the contract as of, because we weren't comfortable with the extent of time and the escalators. Because we thought that was too much of a risk for the town to take.
And in all reality, like I said, the community power program is just fantastically successful. There's no reason why this can't be around. But again, like utility rates, you don't know what's going to happen 10, 15, 20 years from now. So do we want to obligate town taxpayers for 25 years in case the plan collapses? That could be a tough sell.
Yeah, and to the gentleman who was speaking on the board, so I can't see your name here. I think that's why I was kind of suggesting the idea of matching up the amount of electricity from the project to the town. I know the school's different, different board, but like the municipalities and electric law, as to the members of the committee's concern, which, I can acknowledge it. It's hard to think that might happen, but you just went through a pandemic, who would have thought that? So if we're planning for the worst situation, if we matched up the electric load from the solar project to the town's collective usage, then the town's not going away. The town's going to continue to purchase electricity. The town will continue to keep the lights on. And if that worst case scenario ever happened, the CC program completely dissolved, the town would have the ability to continue to get their electricity from the project as if it was on the roof of the building you guys are in right now, for example. While the town would get to assign direct EPA signal power purchase agreements and put panels on their exact property. Multi-properties in this day and age just can't support solar. So using off-site is a solution for towns and schools and other entities to get their power. You've probably seen a lot of that in the news. We're doing a project I want to see it in the Department of City buildings right now for that exact reason. So that might be a way to solve that. Maybe how I certainly was concerned that I think it's a fair thing the board to consider. That way, all that way, if only the town provides electricity, all residents can go elsewhere, private tax, and some other some other fashion. So that was the only reason I brought that suggestion up.
And that, you know, I don't know what you guys negotiated with Direct Energy before we went to community power. I don't know when that contract ends. And I don't even know what the megawatt usage of the municipality is as opposed to residential usage. It could make sense for the town as a municipality to purchase that power. If they're getting purchase power anyways, depends on, you know, what you guys negotiate next time you go out to contract for municipal power.
Or if the town, and if the town was part of the community power program and all the residents pull out of the program, the only one left in the program is the town, well, the town would just be paying the electric bill as opposed to an additional expense.
And that's
It would
one,
just be, it might be a higher electric bill.
that's one factor, that one variable that we didn't really consider was what's the town's usage and does the town plan on folding into the community power plan when their contract is up. So, you know, we hadn't really considered that variable when we had all these discussions. So. And
Yeah, I think my idea of that, just for everybody, is more of a, what's the backstop to the worst case scenario? And you guys, you can go, you know, worst case scenario, CCA involves, this wasn't as successful in 10 years ago as it was the first, you know, couple months you guys have rolled it out. What options does the town have? They're the one in the contract. And we've been working with some of the retail suppliers in the market to actually sell our power directly to retail suppliers. So it looks no different than what you sign up for today. So I'm just trying to lay out a couple of different options for the worst case scenario. In my career, I signed up one customer who, it went sideways. The project was on the roof and there was a mechanism to move the power to a property down the street. Not unlike what this might be like, again, if the CCA would be completely, everyone upside down. So just trying to educate everybody involved on, you know, some backup plans to the worst case scenario that we want to see of thing.
Do you feel the committee wants to meet again and discuss it further in light of this new information?
Well, we did feel like we were under a bit of time pressure, which is why we wanted to talk to you guys this week, and it sounds like Andrew's able to push that deadline out a bit.
But if your biggest concern is the term, and that's not changing.
Right.
I'd still be against it, just personally, only because if we're tied into this, if everything goes out, it's just the town buying power, we're limited, again. We're not gonna be able to negotiate.
You opposed to a 10-year plan or a 25-year plan altogether, either way?
I think 10 years is too much also.
We're not for raising stabilized, that was our other concern.
Well, I think just running it through the community power is the way to do it, in the respect that we're not supplying energy. We don't want to get involved in it. You know, we're a buying group, we're not.
It makes sense that
We want
someone
to negotiate every
Direct
18 or
Energy
30
or
months.
Community Power Coalition should be buying this power
Right.
for their customers. That makes more
And
sense.
they might, by the sounds of it. So.
Well, we wouldn't know that, and I mean, we can talk, if we can bring all the parties together in October, it's worthy having another discussion. Because if Bob Hayden comes in and says, I want that, if you guys don't want it, we want it. The solution's right there, right?
Yeah, and we also have we have 2 retail suppliers that we're working with actively right now. That, like I said, are interested in being the off-taker of power, and they have to have to deliver it to a buyer like the town or the CPA in the terms and period, the time frame you guys are looking for. We're trying to solve it as well. I respect the concerns of the board and the committee. And that's why we're doing this. You know, more and more retail suppliers out there have a customer who have certain goals they're trying to meet by way of local energy being produced in their community, certain sustainability goals they might have. And so that's why we've been having a discussion in parallel. So we have those resources. I haven't spoken to the town's current retail supplier, like have that opportunity, because they might be willing to be the buyer. And they can just bring to the CCA the product, bundle together in the background. You guys aren't even part of it. You're not the contract, you're not the party you contract with. You're just entering your CCA program with a retail supplier. So if not, you work with current, there's others that are very active, interested in having a lot of experience in this market to work with us so we can get power needs met, and then we can share one with the town. So again, there's lots of options here. I just didn't want the board to make a decision without all the information to see if there's some commonality here to find a path to this project and really be not only hosted in Swanzey, but have a power here, here. I wouldn't want it to go to some other town in Hampshire, for example. I'd rather keep it local if I could, but again, I respect that the board's comments should consider different issue.
Okay,
Analyze further and report back.
Y'all have done a great job.
Yeah, thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, so we're gonna let you guys
Thanks,
study it
Andrew.
further and get back to us.
We'll work with Julius and I'll schedule another meeting and see what more we can learn. That's what we're here for.
Thank you.
Could be a win for all if Bob answers that question the way you'd like him to answer.
It's the truth.
okay.
Thank you for your time.
Thank you.
Thank you. Joe?
30 seconds or less.
Yes, thank you, Andrew. We're gonna let the committee try to meet with you and discuss it further.
Okay, so great. Thanks, everybody. Appreciate your board this evening. Thanks.
Thank you.
There's that presentations for stops, and so we can wait if you want.
It's not firm.
Okay.
We'll stay in order, I think, right? Stay in order.
Be very quick.
All right. Good to see you, Joe.
Good to see you as well. Good evening.
Beverly, I'm gonna make the motion to authorize the expenditure of up to $220,000 for a new dump truck with $170,000 from the Highway and Cemetery Equipment Expendable Trust Fund and $50,000 from the USDA Rural Development Community Facilities Grant.
How's that sound? Second.
Okay, we got a motion, it's made and seconded. Any further discussion? Hearing none, those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
I also have a few other things for the board that really need to be addressed. One, starting with the Denver Thompson Bridge. It's in need of about $250,000 in maintenance, which would be planned for. The bridge has been looked at by engineers. We've also had a bridge contractor look at it. There are funds set aside for it. The bridge is in very good shape as far as the steel goes, the decking, the membrane, and one of the joints need to be replaced. One of the things about doing the bridge is a challenge. We're talking with the contractors and the engineer. Is they would prefer to shut the road down completely for up to a month. Obviously, Mike Brantley and I have been talking about it. It obviously have to be done when school is out. So the goal will be next summer to start work in July and finish before the school starts. The downside to not closing it, it can be done without closing the bridge and running one-way traffic, but you can, I've been told by a couple of contractors, you can double the cost because of all the traffic control they have to deal with, and it changes their ability to work that efficiently in the procedure they do. So that's where we're looking for some guidance from the board as far as,
How long do you anticipate the project?
they say within a month they can complete it, but the big question is when they peel up the the concrete underneath, from what they see underneath the bridge, the concrete looks to be okay, but they won't know until they tear up all of the asphalt. So it depends if there's more damage to the top of the concrete, it will take longer. But if the concrete does not need a lot of work, it can be complete within a month. But it can't be put off. I mean, we could probably wait a little bit longer, but it's something we want to do sooner than later because the cost of the bridge and the steel is in very good shape. The longer we wait, the more we risk for erosion and damage to the steel.
And how would this impact the fire department and local?
There would be some, Mole Pro wouldn't have an issue as far as, because most of their traffic is coming in. And it's something we definitely have to have some discussions with the fire department and the other substantial is the campground. That's their busy time. However, there's no way this could be done with school in session. It would be too difficult with the bus routes.
So how would the heavy equipment get to Mold Pro coming off?
Route 10.
They would come off of Route 10 on that side of the bridge, so they really, the only challenge is they had their trucks that were heading on Route 12 wouldn't be able to cut across town. It would significantly decrease the truck traffic going across town, but Mold Pro would be able to get in easily from Route 10 without crossing the bridge. The bridge is on the other side of Mold Pro.
Oh, you're right, I'm sorry.
You had me question myself, right? Yeah,
No,
yeah,
like you said, the big question is the fire trucks.
yeah. But
To get to Route 10,
yeah, to get
they
the,
can't.
no, they're gonna have to go all the way down to Westport Village and or come out towards
So
Ross.
we might have to put one of them on.
Post something in your new park.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, either at the park or.
Yeah.
Brown
Something we have some discussions
Solar
with the fire departments, like, I couldn't see doubling the cost of it to keep traffic open.
I think these are things that you've got to sell the people.
Yeah, I think we just start communicating. I want to talk to the board first, but I think it's important that we start messaging to the community.
Yeah.
Plan is to do this next year, but getting it out ahead of time that bridge is going to be closed. It's a major thoroughfare for motorists, it's just gonna mean more traffic on Main Street, but for the commercial vehicles, a lot of commercial vehicles come across Eaton Road. A lot of the homeowners will be happy about that because they won't be able to, but they can still come in from Westport Village, but the big issue is going to be the fire trucks and like you said, the communication.
But even if you stationed a fire truck on that side,
Yeah.
you know, I mean, these are things that can be worked out.
And that's why we're in the early stages and we
And they've
want,
gotta be worked out,
yeah, we want to bring it to the board.
but we want it worked out properly. In other words, shut it down. I mean, they shut down the summer tunnel for Christ's sakes. So,
It hadn't affect me.
what?
It didn't
Is there a
affect
way that it could be shut down, but the work be done so that emergency vehicles could pass if needed?
At times I would say yes, but not all of the time. There would be times that the bridge wouldn't be passable. We look at that with all of our construction projects, that even though traffic slows down, if we can let emergency vehicles down, but there will be times, like when they're doing the joint, that you just simply won't be able to drive over the bridge. But like I said, what our plan would be to start communicate with the fire department a little bit more, communicate with the campground, and start getting some information out there. But our next step will be putting out a RFP and having the work needs to be done during this time frame. I know Cold River Bridge is very interested in doing the work. I don't know what other interest we will get, but I'd sort of communicate a little bit more with these contractors to see exactly what they have for ideas.
The campground has options, so they can communicate that readily. They're not convenient necessarily, but they have options, but the fire department doesn't have an option.
No, but something I'll have to talk a little bit more with the chief and the police department for that matter, but they can, they can obviously, their response is not gonna be challenged that much, but dealing with some of the issues when there is an emergency. But like I said, it's in my opinion that we wanna do this sooner than later, because the cost of the bridge down the road is gonna be a lot more than that money we have set aside for maintenance.
What's the timeline for North Winchester Street?
Still working on grant funding on that. It could be the following year. We obviously wouldn't want to do that in the same year, but I don't think North Winchester and California Street is going to go next year. We're hoping maybe get it out to bid next year and do it the following year. We may have to do a little bit of maintenance work to it at the end of this year. North Winchester Street's really so bad.
All right,
Yeah, we got some more grant funding, but we got to wait for the notice to proceed on that. So that's slowing, I think, the design down a little bit.
Sounds good.
And then, speaking of design, Michael and I have been doing some work on the DPW building. We met with a contractor to just get some ideas and some costs. One of the things we're looking for is putting out an RFP for a design. We've got some prices between $125 and $150 a square foot for what we're looking to do. But the next step would be to put out an RFP to have somebody do an actual architect and design on the project, just because it's going to be tying into the old building.
Right.
Good news as far as funding, but finally finished up with FEMA from the 2021 funding. Some of that money is starting to come in. One of the projects it's going to pay for is a culvert replacement on Wickham Road that is very deep in the ground. It's going to be a contracted project, which they're going to fund. Some other work up on Christian Hill Road. We've submitted everything we have from this year's flooding, and as you know, the governor sent a request for a declaration, but we're still in just status quo waiting to find out where we're at with that. We have still playing catch up. All the roads are back in place structurally, but we're starting now to go back and do some final cleanup and get ready for paving. Paving is scheduled to put those roads in October. We're gonna be doing some temporary paving, hopefully next week up on Hill Road and Town Hill Road. But those are just gonna be patches that will be milled out and repaved with top coat in the future. So we're on track. I'm pretty confident we can get everything done before frost sets in. Hopefully the weather holds up and start seeing a break in rain, because we've been losing a lot of time, especially with the gravel roads, losing a lot of time with the rain. Like really mentioned the park, I don't know if you saw coming in here, we've been working with a contractor. We finally got going on that, on the boat launch. It was due to some delays with some engineering problems and with DES. We've had the materials, we've just been waiting for the green light to go ahead. Should be done tomorrow. And then the next step is going to be working on redoing the parking lot. That is going to be paved at the same time they're paving the roads. The next update that I know is near and dear to some of you is the sewer plant, where we finally got all the pieces for the pilot program, and the sewer contractors are starting that install Friday. They hope to have that new pilot program up and running, and the goal is to improve the way we're treating for phosphorus. They're going to start testing weekly. They really can't give me a solid answer on when they're going to start seeing a difference in results, but this pilot program could wind up being a long term to tide us over for other updates. They're very optimistic it's going to make an improvement, but once again, we won't know until it gets up and running. He said in a month you should start to see some difference in the testing, but really couldn't commit to it. There's just so many moving parts with it.
Sidewalks and signage.
Yeah, so Swords Crossing sidewalk project, as you know, was complete. It came out very well.
Best looking grass in
Yeah.
Swanzey, I think.
That-
You're putting that stuff.
It's like a golf course over there. People keep calling to find out what we use for grass because they want it for their lawns. So I reached out to the state because it's their jurisdiction, addressed a lot of the concerns that the public have and DPW has. I think the bridge has been hit like 3 times in the last 6 weeks. It's on a regular basis, and I'm optimistic that signs will help a little bit, but you see people drive down with large campers and large trailers. They see the bridge, they're thinking they can make it through, so sign's not gonna stop that, but the state have agreed to do a review of it and come back. I said, I looked at the issue with the stop signs, as far as the road radiuses, tell them to consider, do we have another stop sign, and we remove both of them? So they're going to take a look at that, but the big pressing issue is more truck signage. Will it help, hopefully? The other challenge is dealing with Google, reaching out to Google to see if something can be done about, it's my understanding, I haven't done it physically, but if you were in a truck and you put directions, it will send you down that road to that covered bridge. The new road design that we have at Causeway is making it a lot easier for them to turn around. But on a regular basis, you see vehicles coming down through, and then a lot of local people coming down through with big campers and construction trailers. They know the bridge was there and they're just going through it.
What's to stop us from putting signs up?
It's the state's jurisdiction.
What's to stop us from doing?
I don't know the exact answer to that.
Because with the bridge out, the Allen Street Bridge out in Keene, I run into the same situation now on Emerald Street, where it's a 4-way and one's drive-through, the other 3 are all stop signs. And people that are doing the drive-through that don't know, they've never been there before, they don't understand why everybody else has stopped, so then they stop. So it creates that level of confusion. Fortunately, there's no bridge. But in our case, I agree with you, no signs or 2 signs.
Yeah, it can't stay the same. Well, my idea was that we would let them do their review, see what they come back with. If we didn't agree with what they were going to do, or we wanted more, then maybe have the select board draft a letter and put in a second request and kind of escalate it.
Why don't we just do it? What are they gonna do?
Yeah, I don't have any answer to that.
Because we need to make sure that the truckers that are trying to go down there and people that are pulling that kind of construction material across, that it's not allowed.
Yeah.
And we're working, obviously Sly's working with legislation to allow us to hopefully get something passed that will allow cameras to be put up. But in the meantime, why don't we just put up the signs? Let the state take them down.
I guess that is an option. That's a good direction the board would like to go in.
I don't know if the board wants to, but I just think it's.
Yeah.
Why not?
Yeah, I mean, it's not gonna hurt, but sometimes sometimes their ideas are different than ours, I guess you could say.
Well, we found that out in Holbrook, but
Yeah.
but regardless, I agree with you. We give them a shot, but if they come back with no, I think it's our town.
And like I said, I'm I'm optimistic it'll help some, but it's not gonna, like I said, when you have people going down there and they see the bridge and they're still thinking, I think I can make it, the sign is not gonna get them to stop doing it, but even if it makes somewhat of an improvement, because like I said, that bridge gets hit so frequently, and it's all cosmetic right now, but with everything we have going on, it's just, I get asked all the time, how come you haven't fixed it yet? It's like, we had quite the summer, as you know, where damage had been drinking out of a fire hose with a very, very small crew, and hopefully we have some warmer days in the winter, we can get to some of those cosmetic repairs, so it's kind of, that stuff has been put on the back burner.
Could the guardrails be adjusted somewhat? That would have prevented some of the damage.
I don't
Notice
think,
that some of the bridges, the guardrails come right up to the framing,
a
and
lot,
other ones, they step back.
yes and no. I mean, a lot of the damage I see now, people are making it through and then they're hitting it on the outside, whether there's a different height. The damage that's on the southern end of the bridge, the southwesterly side of the bridge, the damage is from inside, something catching on the top and breaking it off. I know there were some discussions about cameras. I've obviously been a strong proponent of enforcement. I mean, at this stage, when the police department catches people driving across it, I think there should be some fines issued. I think we're beyond the warning stage with all the communication and all the complaints people are getting on Facebook. I think some enforcement efforts would definitely help with cameras, especially for that bridge. It's just so much more problematic than the other ones. The bridge over here, granted, we don't have the volume of traffic. The bridge over here with no stop signs on it. You really don't have the road incidents. You really, knock on wood, it'll probably get hit tonight, because I'm saying that, but it infrequently gets hit. The only downside of that now, having stop signs. They have people going across that bridge 30, 40 miles per hour. That's the only downside, but the people seem to just kind of yield to one another down there, and it's infrequently that they're issued. So we're just crossing it was like a free-for-all, just in the time working down there on the sidewalk. It's just amazing, and just different traffic.
All set? All set?
Thank you.
Thanks a lot, John. Take care, Mark. Bye, Jay.
We'll take a brief recess as we get back set up for our next appointment. We'll start on schedule. Make sure Julius puts the feet down this time.
Can't sit there.
No.
That's where the screen's gonna be.
Oh, this is where the screen is?
Trophies, they had it set up.
So did you update the PowerPoint since the last one, or I can do this?
Julie.
I think Joe did a better job than you guys did.
We have to put some money in.
Props.
To make it more professional, no, it's great. Yes. That would be.
Pretty well there, right?
So we got hopefully stairs there again. So that should be basically. The question is, do we get it?
Let's see it. Upstairs.
Upstairs.
Tissues and sticky.
We get behind the scene, yeah. And I think really upstairs, the projector actually isn't on. It's the audio. So,
But you put the projector off the ceiling upstairs.
yeah, it broke out. Yeah.
So there's this,
Large, okay.
We can always eliminate that.
No.
10 years.
I start low and then that helps you guys bring it.
Yeah, be careful of that.
You just
Try it, yeah, I think that does. Julius, you know what he says, it's to change the slides?
Yeah.
Yeah, we have a town administrator pushing the button.
You gotta work up the signal. While we figure that out, you guys want to introduce yourselves?
Absolutely. Thank you. Don Lucier, city engineer in Keene. I'm also the designated local public agency project manager for what we refer to as project number 40666. I'm hoping that's not a number.
Take that as a sign, if you will.
With me tonight is Brian Colburn from McFarland Johnson. They're the design engineers for this project. I will say Brian is a very capable engineer. He is not the regularly assigned staff from McFarland Johnson that works on this project. Unfortunately, our regular project engineer is like rather feeling poorly. So, you know, I don't want to say you got the B team tonight, but, you know, I hope you'll be patient with Brian if he doesn't know some of the answers to questions that you might have. We'll certainly get back to you in the next few days if there's anything that we can't answer.
You did a great job at city council, so I know we'll be in good, we're in good hands.
Oh, you watching?
Afterward, yes.
Wow. Don't take this the wrong way, but you need a good wife.
Stick puppy.
Perfect. Thank you. Okay, so thank you, Mr. Chair, having us here tonight. Just to kind of refresh folks' memory, this project started about a year ago. It is intended to be improvements to the Winchester Street corridor, what we refer to as the Winchester Street corridor. You know as the West Swanzey Road, I believe, is that right? Route 10. Now, this project is funded with funds from the Federal Highway Administration, and it's being administered under what the DOT refers to as the Local Public Agency, or LPA program. Under that program, the local sponsor is responsible for the management of the project. They oversee the consultants, they oversee the construction and what have you. We pay the invoices, and then DOT reimburses us 80% of the cost after the fact. So about a year ago, the city and the town entered into a three-way agreement with the DOT in order to extend what we had envisioned as a Keene LPA project. It seemed to make a lot of sense to continue that project and make it contiguous with work in the town so that our sidewalks didn't end at the town line and people actually could get to Market Basket and vice versa. So that's the sort of paradigm we're operating under. Like I said, I'm the LPA project manager. McFarland Johnson's the engineering consultant on the project. Yeah, okay. So project extents will go from the existing roundabout at Route 101 all the way down to the Market Basket entrance. The project, and this is something near to my heart, also includes the replacement of that bridge that's over Ashwaubenon Brook next to Hamshaw's. Today it's very narrow. There's some Jersey barriers there to keep people away from the guardrails because they don't exist. Bridge is in very rough shape, so we're looking very much forward to getting that addressed. All right, so I'm going to just talk briefly about the LPA process in general. Because we're using the federal money, there's a number of sort of requirements and steps in the process that the federal government requires that we follow. One of them is a public engagement, public outreach process of some sort. The way that we handled that was through the establishment of a steering committee. It was a 7-person steering committee that included 2 representatives from Swanzey and 5 from Keene. We met a total of 5 meetings with the steering committee, as well as a couple of just public listening sessions that were held. One was held here in this building, one was in Keene. That was done early on, last September, October timeframe. After those listening sessions, the steering committee helped the consultants develop what's called a purpose and need statement. And that purpose and need, Brian will talk to about in a second. It really is sort of like, it it's a lot of words, a lot of fancy words, but it actually is quite important. It establishes sort of the metrics by which we're going to judge and evaluate the alternatives that we come up with, right? Which alternative most effectively meets the project purpose and need is kind of how we measure and how we decide on what we want to move forward with. In the years since that time, the MJ team has been busy and sort of working mostly in the background, doing survey, collecting traffic counts, evaluating environmental impacts, and doing a lot of that sort of background work that we're going to need in order to get through the federal permitting process. And eventually, the end of this process, what's called the engineering study phase, is the selection of a proposed action. So at the end of the meeting tonight, we'll circle back to it, and we're going to be asking the board, acting as the sponsor for Swanzey, to select a proposed action, a combination of improvements, features that you want to present to the DOT and to the Federal Highway Administration as this is what we want to build. We don't necessarily have to have that decision tonight. We're prepared to make it great. If not, we can wait. This city hasn't even really started. Well, we've started last week. We started with a general presentation. But we still have at least another month or so to get through the city's process of selecting the proposed action for the work in Keene. So I don't want you to feel rushed. There is time to make this decision. But eventually we'll want, a statement from the board or a letter from the town administrator indicating this is what the town wants to put forward. That information will go into McFarland Johnson's engineering study report that gets submitted to the DOT, and then eventually we'll move forward with a more detailed design of those proposed actions. And at that point, I'm going to start and I'll turn it over to Brian to get into the meat of our discussion.
Okay, thanks. So as Scott said, we had a listening session here last year on October 18th. Was anybody in here? Okay, great. So we broke up into working groups, had a good dialogue with a pretty well attended meeting, and took the feedback from that meeting, and we got a similar one Keene later.
Yep.
And came up with the purpose of the project. So as Son said, it's pretty wordy. We try to underline the real important parts that we can out of it. So it's complete street. It's a term most engineers use for we don't design roads for cars, just cars anymore. We're trying to take into account bicyclists, transit, people on pedestrians, people that live along the road. Heard a lot about the traffic, congestion along the roadway. Also about queuing on the side roads, especially where they cultivate rough turns out of those during the commuter hour. And also about improving the aesthetics, both in Swanzey and in Keene. And then again, that last sentence is just addressing the asphalt roof bridge and getting it onto the more serviceable state. So the purpose is fed by what your needs. Again, it's somewhat repetitive, but just to reiterate, there's a high volume turning traffic along a lot of the side roads. That's contributing to not only excessive delay on the side roads, but in turn delay on Route 10, Winchester Street as well. Heard a lot about pedestrian and bicycle needs. People getting to and from Market Basket from along the corridor, and there's nothing out there right now. Maybe a 1 foot shoulder, but really not much. Heard a lot about excessive speed, particularly down in the Swanzey end. Context really changes as you're heading north up Route 10 with that Market Basket driveway, and it's taking too much time for people to realize that they left a state highway and started enter more of a residential business area. There is a snowmobile crossing, so including that, bringing in the bridge. So we did traffic counts, last year. Want to make sure we have the most up-to-date, post-COVID traffic information that we could get. We use those to establish peak hour volumes. There's some massaging of the numbers we do to look at how, we count in October. Is that really the peak month of the year? We've got some data that DOT we used and come up with our design hour volumes for current year. And then we worked with coordination of people with planning groups, both Keene and Swanzey, as well as DOT to estimate growth over the next 20 years or so, and come up with our true design hours. So we're looking out over 20 years to 2045. So we looked at how different options were going to function. Really wanted to make sure that those were going to function well into the future. About 1% growth that we looked at, which is over that period, depending on where we're looking, was resulting in about 20 to 30% increase in traffic.
I'm going to interrupt for a second, just kind of expand on that, because the growth factors that we assumed were a big part of the discussion with the steering committee. We actually, the design team and I met with the Keene Planning Department, the floodplains administrator. We were lucky in having your planner as one of the representatives on our steering committee to talk about, things that were on the horizon for the town. And we really stressed about what is that growth factor, because if you overestimate that growth factor, you end up building a lot more capacity than you actually need. If you underestimate that growth factor, 5 years from now, 10 years from now, you've got congestion problems again, and people think you don't know what you're doing. So we did a lot of due diligence to try to come up with what we think was the right number. 1% per year for Winchester Street is what we used. 0.25% for the side streets, the side roads that come off of it, particularly in Keene, Fairbanks, Wetmore, those are built out. Right? For the area off of Priff Road, where there's a lot of vacant land, we looked at the development potential, and Bill probably can speak to this a little bit. Good developable land is becoming harder to find. And until this point, that land hasn't been widely developed because it's been expensive to develop. Eventually, the cheap to develop land is going to run out, and we think that in the next 20 years, we're going to see stuff happening there. But it's all in the floodplain, so we know that a portion of that land is going to have to be used for floodplain storage, floodplain mitigation. So we made the assumption that only 75% of the available lands in that Priff Road project area would actually be used for development. The rest would be used for floodplain mitigation. And then we looked at, what the Keene zoning rules say about development in there, or how much use traffic would that generate. So that's the underlying assumptions, and I feel pretty confident in them, but it was definitely a thing that we thought about a lot. Okay, sorry.
Well, I'd say if you have questions as we're going along, feel free to raise your hand. I don't know, we'll just answer them as they come rather than trying to roll back.
So that invite goes for everybody. We'll see you if you raise your hand.
So as we looked at the corridor from Market Basket up to Route 101, kind of separated into three different contexts in these three segments here. So as we look at the southern segment, sort of the Market Basket has its particular context, but it's more, other than that, it's fairly residential. Get into Keene around Matthews Road, the context starts to change. Obviously, Bracco Street is a major place for work. And then as we get towards Hampshire Lumber and into the north segment, the context changes again, and driveways get a little bit more dense. more retail in that area. So we looked at, and the traffic volumes changed in these segments as well. So these are the three segments after we analyzed this. So we start with the north segment. Looked at a fair amount of options, number of lanes to accommodate the traffic we were seeing. We looked at various ways to handle left turns, whether it was two-way left turn lane in the middle, or in this case, we opted to go with center median, so between the two roundabouts. So there will be no left turns. Anybody who wants to get to the other side of the street will have to use one of the roundabouts to reverse direction.
And I should say at this point that when it says the North segment recommendation, this is what the steering committee has recommended to the town of Swansea and to the city of Keene, right? So next week, we're going to be meeting with our municipal service facilities and infrastructure committee. We're going to have the same kind of discussion, and they're going to have to consider that recommendation and ultimately make a decision and recommend that to the city council, right? So at this point, these recommendations are what came out of the steering committee process. I don't know if that's going to end up being what the city of Keene will ultimately decide to move forward with, but that's what was recommended.
The cross-section there in the bottom right, again, highlights committee's recommendations, so it's a raised median, separated in the two directions of the traffic. Bicycle lanes in both directions, so 5-foot shoulders, providing accommodation for those users. And then a sidewalk on the west side, which is on the top of the page, here throughout this segment. There's also, so it's to facilitate both traffic on Cliff Road and no left turn segment through here. But it's a hybrid roundabout post at the Cliff Road intersection. This is relatively the same size as one that's currently being constructed here.
What does a hybrid roundabout mean?
So a hybrid roundabout means not two lanes around the whole thing. So the Key Road finally opens. I think it's still operating in a single lane.
It is,
right now. So as you're continuing on Winchester Street, the roundabout will be two lanes, similar to the one at one intersection.
The other example you might be familiar with is the main Marlboro Winchester Street roundabout that's been there for 2007. There's two lanes going north and south on Main Street, but there's only one lane approaching from Marlboro Street or Winchester Street. So depending on which leg you're approaching from going to, some areas of the roundabout have two lanes, some have one.
I've wondered that sometimes when I'm going around it. I was like, I thought I was in a different lane. That's not, doesn't seem to be here anymore. So,
Yeah.
okay, that's helpful. I didn't know that.
That's why it's considered.
Okay, so we're working our way to the south.
I got a question.
Jim?
So how do you anticipate if you've got a sidewalk on the one side and a pedestrian getting across, so say you're like, I'm guessing those are the car dealerships, and you want to cross Route 10, how do you anticipate what pedestrian is going to do there?
You ever play Frogger?
This is where we find out
It's a fair question. When we're chatting with the public and the business owners, there doesn't seem to be a lot of pedestrian demand on the dealership side of the corridor, which is why the recommendation was just to have the sidewalks on the other side where there's more pedestrian activity. So at the roundabout, there will be sidewalks all around, so if somebody's going down the road, that they can maneuver that way. But the committee's feeling was that there's just not enough pedestrian activity on the east side to warrant the cost of these sidewalks.
So I can't, like, where is, like, where the Tempest used to be? Is that on this segment?
That does have a laser pointer too.
Let's see if I can get this thing. So Tempestus is
Up there.
right right here next to, Wetmore.
It's just north of Whitman.
Almost sure that's right.
So I'm just thinking, if somebody wanted to get a sandwich, if that opens up again as a restaurant, I mean, you better go down to the roundabout and around and cross.
Yeah, there wouldn't be any mid-block crossings between here and here.
Oh, there won't be?
There won't be any
Oh,
marked
not
sidewalks. There won't be any marked crosswalks.
So they're gonna have to go around. Because there is gonna be a median strip in there?
Correct.
And, well, I could see people going to the meeting and then waiting and then going.
That's not what we're gonna recommend. We're gonna, recommend that they go to the crosswalk, obviously. But yeah, there wouldn't be like a fence line or anything like that.
So working our way south, so this is the middle segment. Traffic volume here drops off to the point where we only use one lane in each direction on Winchester Street. Again, the recommendation was to go with the raised median to eliminate left turn movements. So obviously that's a pretty good change for Bradco Street. So those people will have to come out, take a right, and then use a roundabout opposed to Matthews Road to switch direction and head. Again, the one at Matthews Road, I think that's another hybrid. I can solve that.
So, this was, not without a lot of discussion as well. The chair of the steering committee was actually Doug Hamshaw, the owner of Hamshaw's Lumber, so it was very helpful to have his perspective. And it's obviously gonna affect that business, right? Not being able to make lefts in and out, and these customers are gonna have to use these roundabouts to get to his shop. But I think there was pretty good consensus and recognition that the safety concerns to the corridor, left turns are definitely problematic, especially at Bradco. I will say, this may be something Brian doesn't realize, although it's one lane in each direction through this section, at Bradco, we're actually going to add a second lane just between Bradco and the roundabout. And that's so the exiting traffic from Bradco has its own dedicated lane essentially to merge into traffic. And then if their intent to go north on Winchester, they would take this right out of Bradco into a lane that starts right here. And then they would have the opportunity to switch lanes in the inside and then go around the roundabout. So that I think helps quite a bit with that movement out of Bradco. I'm just gonna keep it up.
It's good.
Yeah.
It's good stuff. Any other questions?
Similarly, just the sidewalk on the west side here as
Just
well.
the side of-
No mid-block crossings other than the roundabouts.
So for the southern segment, we looked at, we just want to highlight just one of the different alternatives that were looked at. So the top cross section is what exists today. Again, it looks so narrow lanes, narrow shoulders. There's no really space for bicyclists or pedestrians right now. We looked at two alternatives. Those are the cross sections on the bottom there. One on the left is maintaining 2 lanes of traffic. We put in the 5-lane bicycle shoulders in both directions. And then again, the sidewalk on the west side for the whole stretch in the southern section. And the plan, we're actually proposing sidewalk on both sides for a short portion of the segment. And then the other alternative we looked at was a 3-lane section. So it's 1 lane in each direction. With a center left turn lane, center dual use turn lane. So that's similar to the setup of current Winchester Street closer to the roundabout. Again, bicycle sidewalks, the bicycle lanes, and then the sidewalk. They're obviously all The second alternative is has a bigger footprint, but should be safer because we're taking those left turns out of the driveway, giving them space to be. It should actually improve somewhat just the capacity of the road, since left turn vehicle won't be blocking the lane while I'm
No, we did consider and discuss with the committee another option that's not shown here, which is basically the 3-lane section, but replacing that dual-use turn lane with a median and continuing that median all the way to Market Basket. And we'll get into in a second how we reached out to residents in the neighborhood and you know, talked to them about that and what their thoughts were on that option. So.
Bill, I have a question. Maybe you're gonna say this up here, but when you say that it's going to go to the Market Basket driveway, does that mean we're losing that traffic light? Or they're going to put a roundabout there, or is it?
Fantastic segue.
Is Jonah plant?
I planted. Yeah, we're good. We're going to talk about that later.
Good.
So this is the layout of what a three-lane section would look like. It's somewhat really nice out. So 2 lanes only there. Just to give the context to the footprint of the road, so the 2-lane will more or less just be a little bit of widening to accommodate the shoulders through the length. And very minimal widening as you start to get upwards on the basket, just because of the turn lanes that are already there. So for the 3-lane, obviously the road's quite a bit wider. We know there's some fairly large trees in that stretch. The goal is to retain as much of that as we can. That would be figured out as we get into the final design stage of the project. Both of these options could be implemented with the traffic signal that currently exists at Market. So, as Son alluded to, the center turn lane or the center median was evaluated here. Just as we get into some further slides, recognize the traffic is getting less as we get further south. Also, the nature of the left turns are quite different. So rather than these big side streets or large businesses, they're getting multiple left turns during the peak hour. The turning movements through here, in a lot of them are just the single-family homes. So they're quite infrequent. So again, just going back to the 2-lane sections, this is the sidewalk layout for all the options here in Swanzey that we're proposing. I heard a lot during the listening session about pedestrians from Center Terrace and I think it's Winchester Woods development and their desire to get to Market Basket on foot. So I thought it was prudent to, for that stretch, provide the sidewalk on the east side and get them to the intersection to Market Basket with the traffic light with all of them across the road.
So it's just showing a crosswalk both at Lucinda Terrace and also at the entrance, that traffic light, into Market Basket.
Are those lit? Are they gonna be lit with the safety lights?
So if this remains as a signalized intersection, it would be incorporated into the signal timing, right? There would be a pedestrian phase of the signal. At Lucinda Terrace, we would probably propose, and this is more of a further preliminary design kind of question, but most likely we would propose something like a one of those pedestrian beacons, push button, and it would flash to let people know that you're in the crosswalk. It doesn't change the law. The pedestrian in the crosswalk still has the right of way. You're supposed to yield to them. It just draws attention and makes that pedestrian a lot more obvious.
So we did also look at a roundabout at the Market Basket entrance. The benefit, a couple of benefits that were brought up, I think, as part of the discussion from the steering committee. One is there are people in that stretch between Market and Basket and Matthews that they want to wait for the left turn, because it's busy during the day, they then could use this roundabout to reverse direction. But another real benefit here is this one really would help reinforce the changing context and driving behavior. So as I mentioned at the beginning, the context of Route 10 to the south is pretty high speed, very frequent driveways, really after Market Basket that changes. So the roundabout would have that cue to help drivers understand and really have to slow down. You're only going to go through the roundabout at 50 miles an hour. And then the context with the sidewalks and the curving would hopefully keep speeds lower.
Roundabouts are interesting. There's like a weird psychology that happens, when people stop at a traffic light and it turns green, it's like the race starts and they go. When people go through a roundabout, they slow down, they don't stop. And there isn't that tendency to get on the gas and come out of it. And they do a great job of calming traffic and slowing it down. So that is a benefit for sure. All right, so go back for just a second. So I will say that the roundabout at Market Basket was not part of the original concept, original scope, original thought for the project. This came about during discussions, as a result of the listening sessions and discussions with the steering committee. The steering committee asked us to go to the DOT and ask them if they would consider participating in something like this. So we had that conversation with DOT, and quite honestly, I didn't expect that they would be willing to even entertain it, since they recently did work on here, and so it's a new roadway. But they said, yeah, if this is the way they want to go, at the very least, we think you should include it in the engineering study phase, evaluate it, make a decision on how you want to go, and then put that forward in your engineering study report. So it's not a yes definite that DOT will fund this and move forward with it, but they were at least willing to let our consultants look at it, evaluate it, come up with these concept plans. And if the town decides that this is what we want to put forward, that would be in the engineering study. Yeah. All right, so the steering committee was a little uneasy with making, major decisions about this end of the corridor. None of the members of the steering committee were residents of this neighborhood. Nobody really felt comfortable speaking for the residents that this would have an impact on. So the other thing that they asked us to do, aside from just asking DOT if the roundabout was an option, they asked us to reach out to this neighborhood and try to get some feedback on these questions, see what it sort of take the pulse of the neighborhood. So we ended up sending out a survey to all of the single-family residents south of Matthews in Keene, as well as all of the residents and business owners, business properties in Swanzey that live basically within this project footprint, including all the residents at Winchester Woods. The things we asked them were, can't read it on here, but where do you live, first of all, within this corridor, so we'll understand where they're coming from. We asked them what their thoughts were about the significance of what we perceive to be the problems: congestion, traffic, safety, speed, what have you. What the most urgent problem that needed to be solved would be. And then we asked them some sort of like leading questions like, would you be willing to, would you be interested in a solution that widened the road even if it meant losing property? Would you be interested in a solution that restricted left turn lanes if we could provide a convenient place to turn around? These sorts of things. So Brian can get into the results of that survey.
Yep. I'll point out, you got 24 responses, which I thought was pretty good response rate.
It wasn't bad. It was like I think about 20% response rate. So but better than a lot of surveys.
So this was the neighborhood perceptions. So the bottom axis there is people voted on the left, there was no issue. People voted on the right, there was a really big issue for them. So blue represents speed. So you can see most people were in the it's a big problem category, and everybody saw it as at least a significant problem. The second one was congestion. Not as large of a favorable response there. Some people didn't really see it as an issue. I'd say probably more than half thought it was at least a significant issue. And then the left turns, the difficulty with the left turns is kind of a pinkish color.
I will say this is totally consistent with what we heard from people at listening sessions. Left turns and speed were the two, number one and number two issues that people kept bringing up.
Yeah, left turns follow the same trajectory of the speed bit. This was a question of what is the most urgent problem. And again, speed and safety, pretty evenly split. Probably liking safety to the left turn.
I think safety, people think of, is a proxy to those left turns, right? That's where you really feel uncomfortable when you're sitting in the middle of the road and you're trying to make a left into your driveway and you don't know if you're about to get rear-ended, right? Yeah.
So, I mean, congestion and some others, got some votes, but they're the majority. So this is responses in favor. So for creating a center turning lane, 73% were in favor of that. 82% were in favor of widening the road, but not a lot of support. Even though we saw a lot of concerns with left turns, not a lot of support for restricting left turns.
So in other words, I mean, people did not like that. In a lot of the write-in comments reinforced that they didn't like that idea. let's just say it that way. They were pretty clear about not wanting that.
So based off the survey and I think further discussions with the committee, we'll say I think I don't know if you mentioned we did a representative of Market Basket on the steering committee as well.
Not an official representative of Market Basket. He is an engineer that has Market Basket as a client. And that was one of the representatives that the town appointed to the committee. So yeah, he had a lot of knowledge about their traffic patterns and their needs.
So based off the survey feedback, recommended the 3-lane section, so 1 lane in each direction with a center turn lane. Recommending replacing the signal at Market Basket with a roundabout. And then sidewalk on both sides of the road in Swanzey. As I showed in that highlighted image before. There's the typical section around the block.
So let's talk about costs. At this point, these are pretty rough estimates of the cost, right? We're still even haven't finished the engineering study phase. So when Brian talks about these costs and what's included, keep that in mind that these are rough estimates, and they're more planning factors.
So the 2-lane alternative, most of that cost is driven by driving sidewalk and widening for the 2 bicycle lane shoulders. Putting curb on roadways, you have bed drainage, so the costs tend to creep up. A little bit of paving work on the road right now. It's not said we would know more about specifics of reconstruction as we get further into the design. For the 3-lane alternative, the one the committee recommended, more roadway widening associated with that, same amount of sidewalks. But you can see that the price, more than doubles at that point. From 850,000 to 2 million.
Would that include right-of-way acquisition, or is that within the existing right-of-way?
Most of it is, maybe some temporary easements, again, it's planning also, a lot of it's percentage based and cost per square foot type estimating. These are total project costs, so it's not just construction. This is the engineering to finish the design, have an engineer on site to make sure it's built correctly, and permit are these costs. So those are the numbers that you compare 2-lane to 3-lane option. And then the roundabout would be about 1.3 million. Construct that, so that would be added on to the other cost. So if the recommendation as proposed, the 3-lane section plus the inclusion of the roundabout, that in total would be about $3.2 million.
Now, the next logical question for the select board that I can't answer is, okay, so what's our piece of that, right? Michael and I were exchanging messages earlier today, and I reached out to our DOT counterparts to try to better understand this. I haven't done an answer yet, but what I'm not clear on is how DOT is treating this project and how they're participating in the costs. So in the city of Keene side of the line, Route 10 is what's called a class 4 highway. We're subject to urban compact rules. You may see the signs that say entering urban compact. Basically what that means is that the state has foisted off its maintenance responsibilities of the state highway onto the municipality. And we're responsible for maintaining that section of Route 10. And once you get over the line into Swanzey, becomes a class 1 highway, which means it's paid for and all the maintenance is performed by DOT. So just, knowing how things work in Keene, for example, if DOT is doing a reconstruction project on Route 9 or Route 101, we don't participate in those costs. They pay the 20%, even if they're using federal money. The state pays the local match. I don't know how DOT is treating this project within the town limits. If they're looking at this as more of a local project or if this is a state improvement. So I can't answer that question, unfortunately. Which is why I also started out by saying I'm not putting pressure on you to make a decision tonight because that's kind of a big question that needs to be answered.
Just a little.
What's that?
Just a little.
It's kind of a monster ball that's hanging out there. Yeah. Okay, so with that, said, next steps. So McFarland Johnson and I are going to be doing a very similar little dog and pony show with MSFI next week. Is that next week? The 27th, week after. We'll be having the same conversation. Focused more, of course, on the recommendations that the steering committee gave in the city limits, right? The roundabouts and the roadway improvements in the cities. They're going to go through their process. I expect it'll probably be 2 meetings with MSFI for them to deliberate and ask questions and ultimately make a recommendation back to the full city council. So October, November, this will go back to the city council for the city to make their decision on proposed action. Sometime between now and then, we're going to be looking for the town of Swanzey to make its decision on what the proposed action is within the town limits. Once those 2 decisions get made, we give that to MJ. They finish the engineering study report, right? And that basically documents and encapsulates all of this information and bundles it together, forwards it on to DOT as, okay, this is the project, this is our justification, and this is what we want to build. That goes through a process with DOT and Federal Highway, and then they give us permission to move forward with preliminary design, the next step of design, where we'll do a lot more more detailed engineering of the project. That next steps of engineering work will happen, sometime between, let's say, December of '24 and the spring of 2025. Right now, DOT has construction scheduled to start in the spring of 2025. You mentioned right-of-way acquisition. We know there will be right-of-way acquisition in the city limits, specifically at those two roundabouts. There'll be some right-of-ways that we need to acquire. Some lesser strips here and there, but the roundabouts are the big ones. That right-of-way process can be incredibly time-consuming, right? The Upper Winchester Street project that's under construction right now was supposed to have started in 2019, and it didn't start until 22 because of the lengthy right-of-way process. Hopefully, this one doesn't take that long, but I will tell you, and I told the city council last week, I wouldn't be shocked if this project ended up sliding into 26 construction season because of that right-of-way process and having to go through it. Because it's a state highway, DOT is managing the right-of-way process, which is fantastic for me because I don't have to. But it also means that I lose a little bit of control over that process. I can only make so much noise and drive DOT to get work done so fast. So, these things sort of lead me to the belief that 26 is not, would not be a surprise if it slips, if that makes sense. So, but that's where we're at. And with that, I look forward to taking any questions.
Slide mentioned a question about the utilities. I don't know if that, did you get that?
I was just joking.
Okay. We're just curious if the utilities were going to be underground or not. I'm curious.
So we're not planning or budgeted to underground the utilities as part of our work. Does Swanzey have any regulations about undergrounding? No.
It would probably be more your section where it makes sense.
Right.
He was joking. He can be out there.
The same question came
One
up.
of those things.
The same question came up.
Everybody wishes they
Yeah,
could.
absolutely. The steering committee for Upper Winchester Street made the same request, and we wanted to do it. There's no law that can make us force them underground, and it's incredibly expensive to do. So, most likely no. In fact,
No.
as much of a guarantee as I can give you.
Just explain again on the map page, coming out of Bradford, there was a turn lane and one lane. That's the go around the one lane. Roundabout. Instead of
Sure. That might be easier, but just point. So if you can see here in this section between these two, there's a single lane for travel vehicles and a bike lane next to it. Once you get to Bradco, we're actually adding a second travel lane. So vehicles coming out of here have an unimpeded right turn onto Winchester Street South, right? They've got their own lane all by themselves. Now, if they're heading south into Swanzey, no problem. They just stay in that lane, maneuver through the roundabout, and then they'll end up merging. Here is where they merge, basically between Matthews Road and Bergeron Ave. There'll be room for them to merge into a single lane again. Okay? If they want to head to Matthews, or if they want to head into Keene, between Bradco and the roundabout, they'll have the opportunity to switch lanes into the left hand of those two lanes, get into that flow of traffic. Then they'll come around this intersection. Now, they still could continue straight. That is an option. But presumably they switch lanes so that they can come around here and peel off to Matthews, or come around here, go all the way around the roundabout and head north.
south of the roundabout there, it's single lane each way.
Coming north?
Yeah.
Yes. So the northbound, there's a single lane coming into the roundabout, and there's only a single lane all through here. So the 2 lanes is only on that side of the roundabout. And it's specifically for the vehicular traffic.
I can see the need for the 2, Griff Road and Matthews struggling a little bit with regard to the Market Basket one, only because the land south of there is virtually undevelopable without a significant change from New Haven. Is there anything other than the behavioral context that you mentioned that provides support for the roundabout as opposed to the signalized version?
When this topic first came up, in my mind, it made a lot of sense if the desire was to have a median through this section of the road. Restricting left turn lanes, left turn movements, does a lot to improve safety, but if you don't have a convenient place to turn around, it's not really a practical solution. Given that the recommendation is to not have a median and to have that dual use left turn lane, it makes the argument for the roundabout a little less urgent, I'd say. It helps with driver behavior for sure. It has that traffic calming effect. There's safety benefits, there's environmental benefits, roundabouts versus traffic lights that we can talk about. It also gives folks in the corridor that are having to make that left turn out of, say, Bergeron or Buffalo, there's probably not much traffic out of Buffalo, but the folks in that corridor that are trying to make a left and head north will now have that opportunity to use the roundabout to make a turn, right? So it gives them an option. But yeah, I think you pretty much picked up on the point that it's less needed if there isn't a median.
And people really support that center turn lane. When I lived in the Midwest, I think everybody understood how to use it. Here, I'm not quite so sure. I don't see people.
Engineers don't like this, right? I remind them that there's a reason why people call them a suicide lane.
Yeah.
Right? They're not my favorite. I am not a huge fan. But you saw the results of the study, and it's not a scientific poll, right? It's the sample size of 24. But yeah, it was definitely a desire from the people living in that area to have that dual-use turn lane.
Just seems to make sense if you're running a median, run the median, and have people get the experience. What modern traffic is going to be.
You're not going to get an argument from me.
Okay, good, thank you.
Thank you very much, and I'll just work with Michael on how you want to move forward.
Please, thank you.
Excellent presentation. Thank you.
No, I don't need him. What's that? I don't need him. I care about you.
Yeah, it's all about the vision over the
They just have fence frames. Just roots. I don't feel about that. Just
Brian.
and there's not even real. No, I agree. I mean, there's it's tight because of the road being.
Ultimately, I guess you're best on the station, but it's probably weird.
People are thinking, information.
And, I think you're in favor, I agree with you. That's section 2080, I get it. Yeah, that's what we know.
States can pay the local share.
We go to Manchester.
I'm basically,
I just took a copy.
There's such an issue with the brown. That's just straight on the traffic. You know, the lady would allow a break. So they could turn left to go to Manchester. And right now, it's just a steady street with your cars. The only thing they had is traffic light.
Answer my question about that bridge. How come the original bridge,
Sunday,
albeit it was dropped, but, created the same,
take a day.
40 years of traffic. Where is taking so long to construct a new bridge?
Which bridge are we talking? On Island Street?
Yeah.
Oh, Island Street.
No, seriously,
It's been a long time.
it's been tremendous amount of time. So, David, you're up.
I guess it's just a matter of getting the footings out, maybe, you know, for the Bailey Bridge. Because it's a jackhammer.
You got a good day.
Yeah, I had that was with the
He flew in.
PLD committee.
Oh, Jesus, you're there.
Thank you.
Yeah, I don't get some presentation, I just got a little fact sheet with it. Wait for Michael.
Well, Michael knows it, so.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
All right, so for the minutes, Dave Hickling, Airport Director. So we've been working for a while here trying to develop some of the land on the airport. Last fall, we had McFarland Johnson do a land use study where they identified all of the development parcels, kind of put it all in one document, what was available there, what the best use of those parcels were. And then we got to the point where we got this and we said, all right, now how do we market this? One thing to note, I know it's kind of hard for people that aren't in the airport business to understand, because we take money from the FAA, we've got a bunch of grant assurances to follow, and they say with those grant assurances that if there's land that we have that can be used for aviation, we have to use it for aviation. We can't develop it for non-aeronautical use. So we have a lot of land that's available for aeronautical use for development. So how do we market these parcels for aeronautical development to companies that can meet that standard? And that's where the dilemma was, just not having that capacity to do that. So I was looking for a consultant to put together a marketing plan to market this. I ended up going to a conference, an FAA conference, and there was a speaker there from a company that actually what he does is he brokers land at airports to aviation businesses. So he's got the contacts in the aviation businesses that want to develop. They contact him or this company looking for opportunities to develop in, and people with or airports with property to develop up to them try to make that connection. So reach out to them. They gave us a proposal. It's a two-part proposal. It's actually shown as two different companies. One's a subsidiary of the other ones, and really basically working together. So step one of the process would be doing a market study. So that this company doesn't want to come in and start marketing parcels or something that they don't feel is in the market. So they would require us to pay them to do a market study where they would look at all the parcels, see what we have. They look at all the airports around us, see what our competition is. They would basically do a SWOT analysis to find out what our strengths and weaknesses are and see if they think this is a project they want to take on. So obviously there's a fee for them to do that. That would be part one of the project. Part two is them actually marketing and brokering the parcels. So where they go out and start advertising, making connections, and trying to attract in a developer. I'm not going to go through all these bullets, that's why I printed it out so you guys can read through it. But you can see that the company has ideas already of who to market to. So types of aviation businesses that we can bring in,
are an aircraft maintenance company. So there's companies out there that specifically do maintenance on types of aircraft. So it could be a Cessna or a Cirrus or Gulfstream. And they would build a location, build a hangar, bring in mechanics, and they would bring those type of aircraft in to do periodic maintenance that has to be done. So that's one opportunity. There are aircraft management companies or Part 139 operators. So basically they charter corporate airplanes. So CNS owns their own airplanes, but there are a lot of companies that just charter aircraft. If they need to fly corporate executives from Boston to Dallas for a day, they hire these aircraft to do that. So that is a company they can market to. Boston is a great market for this, but it's extremely expensive to have your aircraft there. So it makes sense that you could find a company to do that, locate them in Swanzey at a lot lower cost. They could build the hangar here, bring the pilots, bring the mechanics, and the aircraft here. That would be another market. Evolving technology, advanced air mobility is getting real big. It's basically electric aircraft, electric vertical takeoff and landing aircraft. There's people doing research on alternate aviation fuels. So there's a lot of new technology out there. Another market they could go after to try to bring them into development. So they have the connections with all these. Of course, then there's a bullet there of what would be involved and what we would get out of that package for that piece of legislation. And then part two, there's also bullets that's on the backside, shows what they actually do to market, all the connections they have and how that would be done, which is pretty expensive. And most of the benefit with them, again, is the connections they have and how many people are reaching out to them that are on the other side of this equation who want or are looking for a place to develop. So the fees for this service are a little more complicated. They're a commission fee, and if you look at the chart on the bottom, they're based on the number of square feet it's leased in the lease. When I brought this to the city manager and said, hey, this is what I recommend we do to try to market these parcels, she was really okay with the market study. But when it comes to these commissions, when we look at once we develop, our revenues are limited to the lease. Basically, we would get some from some fuel sales, depending on the business. It would help businesses on the airport, but the city doesn't really have that much revenue coming in. So that's where I came up with the idea of approaching the town of Swanzey and said, hey, can we work together? Swanzey would make the tax revenue off this development. So maybe we could find a way to work together to split the costs doing this project. It would be a win for both communities, so I think that would work well. I think, like I said, that there's still a lot of discussion on how we would work out the commission fees. And there's more in there. They were saying they want commission fees for the entire term of the lease, including renewals. I don't know if that's, really, that just seems like a lot to me. So there'd be some negotiation in there. So what I would propose, if it's a direction the town of Swanzey wants to go, is that I would set up a virtual meeting between Michael and whoever else from the town of Swanzey, city manager, myself, and these consultants to see if we can negotiate some kind of a three-party agreement.
Is this something a TIF district could do? That would the taxes for the TIF be used?
I don't think directly. I think a TIF has to be for infrastructure. But it's kind of the concept we're using is that the income that we expect to receive on the taxes would offset some of the commission. So it's the same idea, but I think a TIF has to be for infrastructure.
It's just as far as wording it, to try and sell it, because if we tell a town meeting that we're going to be spending X amount of dollars to pay a market person for perpetuity, that isn't going to fly.
The perpetuity is that's challenging. I agree with David on that. The length is a concern. And how it was initially pitched was that the city was going to pay all the upfront costs and the lease payments were just going to be on the town side. We discussed just kind of an even division, so everyone shares in the upfront and everyone shares in the future. If you guys like the other option, we can go back to that. But I think the even split seemed to lower our long-term risk here.
It's my understanding the city manager was fine with it.
Great.
Well, as we talked, I think our only risk is that $10,000. The other we're gonna gain, and it's an offset. It's the length of time.
Yeah. And I've mentioned that to him, he didn't say, and this is hard and fast, but he didn't come right out and say, let's talk about it. So, and that's where I was trying to get everybody together, that, you know, between the city manager and, you know, whoever from the town of Swanzey's on that meeting, just says, hey, we can move forward, but these are our terms, and then they have the opportunity to set those terms or not. From my point, I just want this to happen, right? I just see this like low-hanging fruit almost, but I understand if neither the town of Swansea or the city of Keene is going to benefit financially from this, then, you know, we have to take that into consideration.
No, it's been something we've talked about since I've worked here, basically the priority of trying to spur more development there as well. So no, it's not out of the blue for us.
What do you need for timing?
I was just waiting for this action. I talked to Michael and he said he'd like to have me bring it to this meeting again. And I guess if it's all right, I'll go ahead and set that meeting.
Yeah, because it is kind of a novel idea. You know, I didn't want to get too far down the road with the consultant if, you know, those paying the percentage on the lease payments, the commission going forward, if that was, you know, something the board wasn't interested in, I didn't want to pursue it further. So we don't need an official yes, sign a contract, but if it's yes, let's learn more and try to negotiate further, then we would go forward with the meeting with David.
I think it's fairly simple. We could have Dave run some numbers for us based on a 10,000 square, not you, Dave, but Dave in Arizona, run some numbers based on a 10,000 square foot building at 20, 35, whatever it happens to be. So we know what the tax revenue is going to be, and that would help us to know how that differs from what the compensation requirement's going to be. But again, for me, it's the long term.
Right.
And so for that, you'll have to share with Michael what the lease rate, I think, would be, because the lease rate is what's going to drive the commission. It's not the build out. But then you know what your gain is, we know what our gain is, and then how we're going to use that to offset the cost of the commission. But I agree with you. To get somebody with that kind of skill set.
It's the best opportunity. You know, for over a year, 2 years, I've been wanting to find a way to develop this, but it's out of my wheelhouse, right? And I've taken the steps I can take, but at this point, it's just not in my skill set. Okay. Well, I got you. Just also let you know we are going to begin negotiation with Envision Energy for solar development on the south end of Big Run. So I think we'll probably come up with something there, working that detail out. So it'll be some good development. I continue to get inquiries and interest in people wanting to build private hangars, larger private hangars. Just can't seem to get one pushed forward through a lease. I think they like the idea, but they look at development costs and there's interest. But hopefully one of those will be able to follow through and get it up to the hangar built. There's an item again.
It's just the cost. And it isn't the pad lease that's driving that cost.
That is correct. It's it's the cost of building anything else for the other.
One piece that came up earlier in our meeting, it was kind of a teaser, so we don't really know what the substance was, but was mentioned from folks in kind of your neighborhood about the Monadnock Choppers activity, and just it's listed on a list of things we're going to hear more about as Monadnock Choppers disturbance. So yeah. I know there was discussion when they went in, and just figured I would mention it. I know our options are limited, but
we have I get the calls to them. They usually from like that. We did have someone else from Keene this week. So the last one I got from a Swanzey resident. I called Kevin, who did it. I don't know if you're aware, but Kevin took a job in Burlington, and he actually was a flight instructor there Monday through Thursday, so he's only been an instructor Friday, Saturday, Sunday, but he did hire a new instructor, and he had to talk to him about the patterns and where it all, which I believe he's done. Most of the time when I hear helicopter complaints, it's not good. We have a lot of helicopter activity. We had 2 military helicopters in yesterday, so a lot of times I'll get those calls, and if I don't know, we did invest last year in some equipment where we record all the radio traffic, so we can go back and review and find out who was actually flying around that. So I would say 80% of the time people call me to complain about helicopters, it's not. It's something else.
Some other group.
We did have one, and I was working. This guy was annoying. He's coming from somewhere in Massachusetts. He had a Bell 206, which is a big turbine helicopter, and he was coming to Keene to do pattern work and training, and he would stay here for an hour and a half. So I was trying to get a hold of him. It's hard to do, to tell him, go somewhere else for a while. He's probably here, so he doesn't bother the people there. I was working to try to get him stuff. He hasn't come back in 1,000 calls. So I'm aware of it, and I really try to get on anybody that's doing more than 20 minutes at a time to change up their patterns and stuff.
Thank you.
Yep.
Okay.
All right.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Have a good evening.
Thank you too.
All right, new business.
So we've done the hearings, we've heard from the planning board and the conservation commission on 110 Pine Street, so we'd be looking from the board to authorize the acquisition of 110 Pine Street for $150,000 from Invest NH fund.
Any other costs associated?
Not that I'm aware of.
Just some legal fees.
Exorbitant commission.
Yeah. Congratulations. I'll make that motion.
Second?
No, there were no brokers.
Motion's been made and seconded to take the affirmative action on 4114A. Further discussion, hearing none, those in favor? Aye.
Is there anybody online? Oh, okay.
That was a public hearing.
I don't care.
I do.
I don't care.
I do. But somebody tonight said they listened to these, or they observed these. Although it doesn't matter if anybody's online, because it's on TV, right?
Well, they can watch it on Facebook, you may not see them on, because that's only on the Zoom
All right.
platform.
B,
I'd like to table that, I got the proposal at like 4:55, so I'll take a few minutes to go over it.
The table in the fire station.
That's my request.
all right. What's the assessment from Perry Lane?
The workforce housing, Mr. Vonley, Mr. Franks with Vonley,
Oh, we table that too.
late in the evening for that, yeah.
I'm sorry, is that being tabled as well?
Yes,
Okay, thank you.
letter from Comprehensive Environmental LLC regarding this section of Swansea Factory Road 101. That's a Keene situation.
It is, they're asking if we have any input, so I figured I'd list it under correspondence if anyone had strong feelings or preferences, but hearing none.
No, apparently. All right,
These will be quicker than they look, hopefully, so.
what are we gonna do, non-public?
Yes, under A for dismissal, promotion, or compensation of public employees.
Make the motion to go into non-public under A.
Second?
Motion been made and seconded to go into non-public under A.
Colby,
Aye.
Walker, Karazinski,